Most of them are not written by Mark. They're either added by another apostle or someone else because they felt it just ends abruptly and the book is not finished. Sometimes even in movies, they make up endings. Nowadays you can buy DVDs with 3 alternate endings, which doesn't necessarily change the whole idea of the movie, right? It just changes the outcome. Same thing about Mark. Can we live without the verses that follow 16:8? Having the rest of the Bible?
Well, most of it's said otherwise.
Okay. Do the verses from 9 and until the end of the chapter reflect biblical teaching? Yes. Do they present any heretical doctrines? Are they in any way interpreting what was spoken before? No. So they cannot be considered a commentary or a footnote or anything other. So we can surely preach and use that in our daily life just as any other portion of the scriptures, because there are some other places in the Bible that are not there in the original writings. But it doesn't change the doctrine. It doesn't change the story of Jesus, because we have the whole Bible to compare it with. Okay? So it just makes it more complete for us as a reader. So there's nothing heretical about it. It's just certain books were lost. If we will actually have all the original writings of the apostles, we'll probably have more than 27 books in the New Testament. But unfortunately, we lost some of them. Of course, we picked up that book by Judas Iscariot. Judas, we just put it into the scriptures, but that was the only one remaining. I'm just kidding. That's the one of the sermons I've heard. At least one thing Judas did right. Wrote a nice letter.
You're kidding.
You heard that preaching?
You're kidding, right?
I've heard that.
No way.
In the Russian church.
Oh, no.
I don't believe it.
What's that, Church of the Red Square?
Does the ending in modern day Bible make Jesus' resurrection invalid? No. Right? Okay, so Q&As. Roland. Roland.
Yes, got it right here. In the book it said,
Which book is that?
Jesus.
dictionary.
That's just university.
Yeah, I
Heard
just-
what university.
Yeah, I just want your opinion on this one.
Okay, go ahead.
So this curious fact suggests that Jesus almost wishes to replace the concept of Messiah or Christ by that of Son of Man. The reasons for this are not clear. So Jesus is almost intentionally wanting to replace Messiah with Son of Man, and it's not clear to them here. What do you think? What's your opinion?
Well, I don't think that Jesus necessarily is doing that. I think Mark and Peter are trying to emphasize that term by Jesus in this particular gospel. Reason for it is that they are trying to portray Jesus as a man. Because as soon as you start talking to Romans about Messiah and God and so on, they'll say, we'll listen to you some other time, like they told Paul. But Jesus does refer to himself as Son of Man, because he is trying to bring closer that association with the mankind that he is representing before the Father. He's saying, I and the Father are one. But yes, I am a son of God, and that sounds very, very irritating in Jewish minds. So if he says, I'm the Son of Man, that doesn't cause any reaction. Right? Yeah, sure, you're a human kid.
Right.
Well, what other term? But he puts a whole new emphasis on that, trying to say that I am born human being, 100%, well, not 100%, perfect human being, but also Son of God.
So you actually think Jesus intentionally gave himself these different titles knowing that the gospel will be spread through different lands, and that people will take the name of Christ differently. So, like you said, the Romans are going to look at.
It might be or it might not be the same way as you were trying to interpret that.
I'm not trying. I'm just
Yeah.
asking you.
The thing is, when Eastern philosophers or teachers speak, they try to use different terms and titles that are appropriate for the moment in order to emphasize whatever they're talking about. So again, we gotta look at the context of the event. We gotta look at the content of the title. What does that mean for us? What does it mean for Jews? What does it mean for Jesus? And then look how it's used in the context of the paragraph, chapter, portion of the book, the whole book, and then the gospel. That's how we find the true understanding of the term. You see, without going through all these exercises, we can only speculate on how it's used and why Jesus does that. He uses numerous titles for himself. For example, Messiah is a very Jewish title. Christ is Greek title, Christos, which means exactly the same as Messiah, but for the Greeks it's better understandable. For Romans, they don't have a Christos idea, or they don't have the idea of Messiah, so Son of Man comes to be the closest one that he can associate, Mark, that he can associate Jesus with in order to present Jesus in a new light, as a suffering servant, or servant, active individual.
So you're saying it's Mark who's doing it, not Jesus.
Well, Jesus certainly referred to himself.
But he emphasizes it more.
But Mark emphasizes that particular title more to bring closer his audience to his message. See? Jesus does use that title, but he uses it on certain occasions. In certain instances, he uses one title referring to himself. In others, he uses a different one. For example, in one instance, he says, I am. Before Abraham was, I am. And that's a blasphemy for Jews, because I am, in this form, is actually the name of Adonai, or Yahweh. It's a first common singular form of to be in Hebrew. In fact, in Hebrew, every verb in the lexical form is in the third person masculine singular. He was running, or he ran, he stood, he was, but never I am in a lexical form. In fact, I think even in modern day Israel, I am is not used. They're using like me is or me am, but not I am, because that will conflict with the idea of God.
So why wasn't Son of Man used later on? I think it's only used twice after the gospel.
To underline humanity of Jesus.
That's it.
It's not just it. See, you got to understand that in the first church, there was a lot of confusion on who Jesus was. Was he a spirit pretending to be in the body, or is he a body pretending to be in the spirit? Which one of the two? In fact, many of the heresies in the first century arose around this very subject, nature of Christ. Did he have double nature? Did he have a united nature, mixed nature, and so on and so forth? That's more of a theological question.
Big time, yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
And I think this reference book is actually touching on a lot of different aspects. Theology, philosophy, and
Yeah, exactly.
intercultural studies and so on. So it's kind of an open question, but it is important for us to know these titles because there was no other way for a Jewish person to present Christ. They couldn't draw pictures, but they could make word pictures. See? And sometimes word pictures are more powerful than just a simple image. hope it's in some way answers the question. It might be a good start for the research or some PhD work you're planning on doing. But that's where I stand. Here I am. So help me God. Okay. Questions on Mark? And Mark.
What?
Huh?
She showed up.
Okay, we'll listen to some other time. If there's no questions on Mark, we are moving on to very important answers. Oops. This is the first part of it. Quiz questions. I hope everyone can see that. We can wrap that